The humid August air of New Orleans hung thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket woven from jazz, fried oysters, and the slow, sweet decay of history. Inside the Gilded Spoon, a diner that had stubbornly refused to modernize since the Eisenhower administration, the air was a different kind of thick, a mix of chicory coffee, burnt sugar from the praline bacon, and the low hum of conversations that had been running on a loop for decades. In the back booth, tucked away where the cracked red vinyl met the shadows, sat Julian Croft. To the other patrons, the Tulane professor grading papers, the two widows debating the merits of a third Sazerac, the tired longshoreman staring into his gumbo. He was just a man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit that seemed to absorb the light, its fabric whispering of a world far removed from sticky tabletops and lukewarm water. His hair, a distinguished silver at the temples, was cut with a precision that suggested a standing appointment with a very expensive barber. No one noticed the watch on his wrist, a Grubel Force double tourbillon 30 de Grasse, a piece of mechanical art worth more than the entire city block. Julian Croft didn't just deal in value, he dealt in foundations, in the bedrock of industries. Croft Holdings was a leviathan of global logistics and private equity, an empire built on Julian's almost supernatural ability to spot the flaw in a system, the crack in a foundation, before anyone else. He loathed these excursions. He came to this diner once a year, on the anniversary of his mentor, Alistair MacLeod's death. Alistair had loved this place. "They don't lie to you here, Jules," he'd said, tapping a spoon against a thick ceramic mug. "The coffee's honest. The food's honest. People are honest when they're not trying to impress you." To Julian, it was just an inefficient operation with a questionable health rating. But he came. He sat. He ordered the blackened redfish and remembered a time when he trusted people. Now he trusted only data, patterns, and the cold, hard logic of the deal. His world was a sterile fortress of his own design, populated by sycophants who polished his ego and managed his billions. He was profoundly, achingly bored. His gaze, a practiced instrument of assessment, swept the room. Predictable archetypes, worn-out narratives. Then his eyes settled on the waitress. Her name was Ilara Vance. She was 22, though the exhaustion under her eyes tried to argue she was older. Her uniform, a crisp white shirt and black apron, was spotless. A small island of order in the diner's gentle chaos. She moved with a fluid, deliberate grace. A dancer performing a complex choreography she had long since committed to muscle memory. A coffee refill here, a cleared plate there, a quiet word with the cook through the pass-through window. Her mind, however, was a frantic ledger of anxieties. Mr. Henderson's toast, burnt edges, just how he likes it. Table 4 is splitting the check 3 ways. 1 is cash. Grandpa's consultation with the neurosurgeon is Tuesday. The down payment for the stereotactic radio surgery is due in 3 weeks. 17,450. The car needs a new alternator. That's another 400. Only 38 minutes left in this shift. Then the long walk to the bus stop. Her grandfather, Robert, was the sun in her small universe. A retired horologist, a master of gears and springs, whose own mind was now being betrayed by a tiny, inoperable tumor pressing against his optic nerve. He was losing his sight, and with it, the intricate world of miniature mechanics that had been his life's passion. The surgery was his only chance, a procedure so delicate and expensive it felt like trying to buy the moon. That's why Ilara, who had been 1 semester away from completing her master's in art history, with a specialization in old master forgery detection, was now an expert in the subtle art of upselling pecan pie. The irony was a constant, bitter taste in her mouth. She had trained her eyes to see the infinitesimally small tells of a fraud, the crack in a centuries-old varnish, the anachronistic pigment in a supposed Rembrandt. But she couldn't see a way to fix the most important thing in her life. Julian watched her, his professional curiosity piqued. It wasn't just her efficiency, it was her attention to detail. He saw her notice the slight tremor in the Tulane professor's hand and place his coffee cup slightly further from the edge of the table. He saw her discreetly hand a napkin to one of the widows who had unknowingly smudged lipstick on her teeth. She wasn't just serving. She was observing, anticipating, and correcting tiny flaws before they became problems. He had been about to dismiss this observation as trivial when the bell over the door jangled, not with the pleasant chime of a new customer, but with the violent dissonance of a dropped cymbal. Two men stumbled in, propelled by a manic, desperate energy. They were thin, almost wraith-like, their movements sharp and jerky like puppets with tangled strings. The taller one wore a faded pelican's hoodie pulled low, his face obscured by shadow. The shorter one had a cheap nylon ski mask stretched over his features, and in his trembling hand he held a black pistol. It was a Glock. But something about it was wrong. "Nobody move! Phones on the table! Face down! Now!" The voice from behind the mask was thin and reedy, cracking with a panic that was more dangerous than any malice. The diner's comforting hum shattered. A fork clattered to the floor. The longshoreman's hands shot up, slow and steady. A wave of collective fear, smelling of ozone and sweat, washed through the room. The man in the hoodie leaped over the counter, his sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. He grabbed the owner, a portly, kind-faced man named Gus, and shoved him towards the antique cash register. "Open it! All of it!" Elara had been returning to the kitchen with a tray of empty water glasses. She was caught in the middle of the floor, no more than 12 feet from the gunman. His wild, terrified eyes, visible through the holes in the mask, darted around the room before locking onto her. "You! On the floor! Get on the damn floor!" he shrieked, the pistol waving erratically in her direction. Julian Croft's body went rigid. His mind, a machine built for risk analysis, kicked into high gear. Two assailants, one firearm, appears to be a Glock 19. Amateur. Tremors indicate high adrenaline, possibly substance influence. Primary motive, cash. High risk of accidental discharge due to panic. Exit strategy is compromised. He had a panic button on his watch that would silently alert his private security team, a small army that could be here in under 5 minutes. His thumb hovered over the crown, but he waited. He watched Elara. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not immediately drop to the floor. With a slowness that seemed to bend time, she lowered the tray of glasses to an empty table. The soft clink of glass on Formica was a gunshot in the deafening silence. Then she raised her hands, palms open, a universal sign of peace. "Okay," she said. Her voice was low, but it cut through the tension like a scalpel. It was the same tone she used to tell a customer they were out of the daily special. "It's okay, we're all going to stay calm. He's getting the money." Her eyes met the gunman's. She wasn't challenging him. She was assessing him. Julian saw it then, a flicker of intense, analytical focus in her gaze. She was looking at the gun. In a nearby booth, the Tulane professor, a man in his late 60s with a known heart condition, began to wheeze, his face turning a blotchy red. The gunman's head snapped towards the sound, his panic spiking. "Shut him up! I swear to God, shut him up or I'll—" "Sir," Elara said, her voice a fraction louder, pulling his attention back to her. She addressed the gunman, but angled her body slightly towards the professor. "Professor Albright, it's Elara. I need you to look at me. Just breathe. Slow breaths. We're going to be fine." It was an act of impossible multitasking. She was managing the robber and performing triage on a bystander simultaneously. At the counter, the man in the hoodie had scooped the cash into a crumpled paper bag and was scrambling back over. "Let's go, man. Let's go," he hissed. The gunman began to back away, his weapon still making nervous arcs across the room. His eyes met Ilara's one last time. In that moment, Julian saw her give the slightest, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It wasn't a gesture of defiance. It was a gesture of pity, a silent communication that said, "This is a mistake." For a split second, the gunman's frantic energy seemed to falter, a flicker of confusion crossing his face before he turned and bolted out the door with his partner, disappearing into the oppressive heat of the city. The aftermath was an explosion of delayed reactions. Sobs broke the silence. Gus, the owner, slid to the floor behind the counter, gasping for air. People fumbled for their phones, their hands shaking. And through the chaos, Ilara moved. She went first to Professor Albright, kneeling beside him, her fingers checking his pulse, her voice a soothing murmur. She got him a glass of water. She checked on the widows, on the longshoremen, on everyone. She was the calm center in the heart of the storm. Julian Croft remained in his booth, a statue carved from shadows. His thumb was no longer near his watch. He had just witnessed the most extraordinary display of crisis management he had ever seen. He had watched corporate titans, men who commanded armies of lawyers and accountants, dissolve into blubbering incompetence during a hostile takeover. He had seen generals stammer under pressure. This young woman, earning a pittance, had faced a gun with more tactical composure and observational acuity than any of them. She hadn't just been brave, she had been analytical. She had assessed the threat, identified the weakest links in the room, both the gunman's panic and the professor's health, and managed both variables simultaneously. It was a stunning demonstration of the one quality he valued above all others: clarity under fire. The wail of approaching sirens finally signaled the return of order. Police officers filled the diner, their presence both reassuring and disruptive. Statements were taken. The adrenaline slowly ebbed, leaving behind a residue of exhaustion and shock. Ilara, her face now pale and drawn, the smudges under her eyes looking like bruises, finally went back to work. She brought the check to Julian's table. Now that the danger had passed, a fine tremor had taken root in her hand. "I am so sorry about that, sir," she said, her voice raspy. "Your meal is on the house, naturally." Julian looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. He saw the frayed collar of her shirt, the profound weariness, and the core of unbendable steel beneath it. He took the check. Instead of a signature, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a slim, platinum money clip, and slid off a stack of crisp, new $100 bills. He counted out 25 of them. $2,500. Beneath the top bill, he tucked a business card. It was made of thick, black cardstock, with his name and a single, unlisted phone number embossed in silver. Nothing else. He placed the stack on the table. "That wasn't fearlessness," he said, his voice a low rumble that was used to commanding boardrooms. "That was analysis. You saw something was wrong with the picture. Very few people can do that under pressure." Before a dumbfounded Ilara could form a word, he stood and walked out of the diner, leaving behind a pile of money that could solve her immediate problems, and a small black card that held the power to either utterly ruin her life or rebuild it on an entirely new foundation. The shrill of sirens eventually faded, replaced by the hushed, fractured whispers of the remaining patrons, and the almost silent clink of Ilara's hands as she mechanically cleared tables. Her body was on autopilot, but her mind was a still photograph of the back booth. $2,500. The stack of bills sat in her apron pocket, a dense, rectangular weight that felt both real and impossible. Next to it, the severe black business card seemed to radiate a cold energy. Julian Croft. A tidal wave of relief, so intense it made her vision swim, crashed over her. This wasn't a tip, it was a miracle. It was the neurological consultation fee. It was the down payment for the surgeon. It was 2 months' rent. It was a gasp of oxygen in a life spent underwater. Her co-worker, a perpetually anxious film student named Chloe, stared at the empty booth. "Ellie, who was that man? Is that what I think it is?" "I have no idea," Elara whispered, the lie tasting like ash. The weight in her pocket felt like a secret, a dangerous and exhilarating one. The rest of her shift passed in a haze. She gave her statement to a detective, her voice even and clear as she recounted the events. She remembered details others had missed. "The gun," she said. "It was a Glock 19, but the finish on the slide was too matte, and the ejection port wasn't hollowed out correctly. I think it was an airsoft replica. A very good one, but a replica." The detective gave her a strange look, scribbled a note, and moved on. She also mentioned the gunman's tremor. "It wasn't just nerves," she added, the memory of her art history lessons on the physical signs of aging in painters surfacing unexpectedly. It was rhythmic, a slight, pill-rolling tremor in his right thumb and forefinger. It could be an early symptom of Parkinson's. When she finally stepped out into the sticky New Orleans night, the familiar sense of dread that usually accompanied her walk to the bus stop was gone, replaced by a fragile, terrifying hope. Back in the small, humid apartment she shared with her grandfather, the reality of the day finally caught up to her. Robert was in his worn armchair, a magnifying loupe strapped to his head, his gnarled, steady hands meticulously cleaning the escapement of a vintage carriage clock. The air smelled of cleaning solvent and old paper. "Rough day?" he asked without looking up, his voice a gentle rasp. She couldn't speak. She walked over to the small kitchen table, emptied her pocket, and laid out the $2,500 bills. Robert put down his tools. He stared at the money, then at her face, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Elara, what is this?" "A tip," she said, the word sounding absurd, looking at her grandfather's face, at the encroaching veil of blindness in his kind eyes. The fear she had so expertly caged in the diner broke free, clawing at her throat. Her hand started to shake, the delayed reaction she had denied herself for hours. The money was real, but so was the card. Julian Croft. She had heard the name before, in the periphery of news reports. She opened her aging laptop, the fan whirring like an angry insect, and typed his name into the search bar. The results painted a portrait of a modern-day Croesus, photographs of a severe, unsmiling man christening container ships, breaking ground on massive automated warehouses, standing before the stock market ticker like a general reviewing his troops. The Oracle of Omaha's dark twin, one Forbes article called him. "The man who sees flaws before they form," said the Wall Street Journal. He was a predator of the highest order, a recluse known for his brutal, logic-driven acquisitions and a net worth that defied comprehension. He was the man from the back booth. Why? Why would a man who could buy and sell countries leave her a small fortune and, more importantly, a private phone number? Men like Julian Croft didn't perform acts of charity. They made strategic acquisitions. The money felt like an investment. The card felt like a summons. For 4 days, the card sat on her nightstand. She paid for the consultation. She paid the deposit for the surgery. The relief so profound, it felt like a physical weight lifting from her chest. She even bought her grandfather, a new high-intensity lamp for his workbench. The money was a balm, but the card was a splinter in her mind. You saw something was wrong with the picture. He knew. He had seen her seeing. What did he want? Was this some bizarre game? You should call him, Robert said on the fourth evening, his voice gentle but firm. He had watched her circle the card like a wary animal. A man like that doesn't do things without a reason. He saw something in you, Ellie. The same thing I see. You notice things. Don't be afraid of your own gifts. Her grandfather's faith was the final push she needed. What did she have to lose? Her pride? Pride didn't pay for gamma knife surgery. With a breath that felt stolen from her own lungs, she dialed the number. She expected a phalanx of assistants, a corporate switchboard, an impenetrable wall. A man's voice answered on the second ring. Croft. It was him. The same low, resonant voice that vibrated with absolute authority. No greeting, just a name. A territory marker. Ilara's mouth went dry. Mr. Croft, this is Ilara Vance, from the Gilded Spoon Diner. There was a beat of silence, a void in which she felt herself being digitally weighed and measured. I know who you are, Ms. Vance. I was beginning to doubt my assessment of you. Your assessment? I assessed you as decisive. 4 days is not decisive. It is cautious. There is a critical difference. Ilara felt a spark of defiance. 4 days is pragmatic, Mr. Croft. I had to secure my grandfather's immediate medical future before exploring a cryptic invitation from a man who, by all accounts, eats companies for breakfast. Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, she could have sworn there was the ghost of a smile in his voice. Fair enough. Pragmatism has its uses. My penthouse, 1 Canal Place. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. A car will be waiting for you at 9:30. The line went dead. No questions. No pleasantries. It was an order. The next morning, Ilara stood before the gleaming black tower of 1 Canal Place, feeling like a sparrow at the foot of a mountain. She wore her only interview dress, a simple navy sheath which she'd painstakingly ironed. It felt like armor made of paper, as financiers in razor-sharp suits and women dripping with understated jewelry swept past her into the marble and granite lobby. The penthouse was on a private, unlisted floor. The elevator opened directly into a space that was less an apartment and more a temple to minimalist power. The walls were glass, offering a panoramic, godlike view of the Mississippi River snaking its way to the Gulf. The furniture was sparse, iconic, and brutally expensive, and on the walls between the vast windows hung art that made Ilara's breath catch. A Rothko, a de Kooning, a small, violent Francis Bacon triptych. Julian Croft stood by the window, his back to her, a silhouette against the hazy morning sky. Miss Vance, he said, without turning. Punctual, a good sign. He turned, his eyes as grey and cold as a winter sea. Please, sit. She perched on the edge of a Barcelona chair, its leather cool against her skin. I do not waste time, so I will be direct, he began, taking a seat opposite her. The money I left you was a retainer. A retainer? For what? For your eyes. You told the police the gun was a replica. You identified a potential medical tremor in the gunman. You did this while managing a crisis. I have spent a fortune on the best security analysts, risk managers, and corporate intelligence firms in the world. None of them could do that. He leaned forward, his gaze pinning her to the chair. 6 months ago, Croft Holdings was the victim of a major corporate sabotage. A 9-figure logistics deal with the port of Singapore was scuttled at the last minute by a leak of sensitive, strategically altered data. The leak was internal. The data was manipulated so subtly that by the time my people found the discrepancies, It was too late. It was a forgery, Miss Vance, a masterpiece of corporate sabotage. I have a traitor in my inner circle, and I cannot find them. My paranoia is a liability, but my instincts tell me I am being watched by someone I trust. He gestured to the art on the walls. I collect masterpieces, but my true passion is identifying the fakes. It is the ultimate analytical challenge. You, Ms. Vance, have the same gift. You don't just see the canvas, you see the weave, the pigment, the artist's tremor. I don't want to hire you as an employee. I want to retain you as a consultant, an independent authenticator. Ilara was speechless. An authenticator? 4 people? Precisely. I have 3 executive vice presidents. Marcus Thorne, head of acquisitions, a brilliant, ruthless deal-maker. Genevieve Dubois, head of operations, a logistics genius, been with me for 20 years, and Kenji Tanaka, head of technology, a Silicon Valley prodigy. One of them is the artist behind this sabotage. I want you to observe them. I will give you a cover, a temporary role as a special projects analyst, reporting directly to me. You will have access. You will sit in meetings. You will read their reports. And you will tell me which one of them is the forgery. The audacity of the offer was staggering. A billionaire, plagued by paranoia, was hiring a waitress to be his human lie detector based on a 10-minute armed robbery. It was insane. And yet, a part of her, the part that felt a thrill when spotting the faint craquelure of a fake aging agent on a canvas, sparked to life. He wasn't just offering her money, he was offering her a chance to use the skills she thought she had lost forever. He saw her, not as a waitress, but as the expert she had trained to be. There are conditions, Croft added, his tone hardening. Absolute secrecy. You speak to no one about this, not even your grandfather, and you will be surrounded by sharks who will smell blood the moment they sense you are out of your depth. They will try to tear you apart. If you fail, if you are discovered, I will deny everything. You will be on your own. He stood, the audience concluded. I need your answer now. Ilara stood as well, the offer letter, detailing a consulting fee that would solve all her problems and fund her grandfather's care for the rest of his life, clutched in her hand. She looked from the terrifying man in front of her to the breathtaking view behind him, a world of power and influence she had only ever seen from the ground. Sharks were predictable. It was the quiet desperation of poverty that was truly dangerous. You don't need a consultant to tell you which of your paintings is a forgery, Mr. Croft, she said, her voice finding its footing, calm and steady. You have one hanging right over there. She pointed to a small landscape near the door. It's a beautiful Pissarro. Except the pigment, that specific shade of cerulean blue in the sky, wasn't commercially available until 3 years after he died. It's an exquisite fake. Julian Croft stared at the painting, then back at her. For the first time, a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It was a chilling sight. Welcome to Croft Holdings, Ms. Vance, he said. Your first day is Monday. Ilara's introduction to the 90th floor of One Canal Place was like being quietly lowered into a piranha tank. The air was thin, recycled, and carried the scent of money and ambition. Her official title was Special Analyst, Office of the CEO, a designation so vague it was a clear signal to everyone that she was an outsider, a mystery to be solved and neutralized. Her workspace wasn't an office, but a glass-walled enclosure adjacent to Julian's own, a fishbowl for all to see. The eyes were on her instantly. They were cold, calculating, and dismissive. Whispers trailed her like a scent. The waitress, Croft hired her on some insane whim. My nephew from Stanford couldn't even get a call back. Her primary antagonist declared himself on the first day. Marcus Thorne. He was the EVP of Acquisitions, a man sculpted from privilege and predatory instinct. Tall, with a politician's perfect hair and a smile that was a triumph of dental engineering, he moved through the halls with the proprietary air of a crown prince. He saw Elara not just as an oddity, but as an affront to the natural order. "Elara, is it?" he said, appearing at her glass door. He didn't knock. He simply materialized. "Marcus Thorne, welcome to the Shark Tank." His tone was jovial, but his eyes were flat and reptilian. "Julian has his eccentricities. We're all just fascinated to learn what particular brand of magic you performed to land up here." "I pour a very good cup of coffee," Elara replied, her voice neutral. She didn't look up from the financial report she was studying, a subtle act of defiance that did not go unnoticed. A sense of humor. "Excellent," Marcus chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "Well, if you need anyone to explain the difference between mezzanine financing and a leveraged buyout, you just let me know. We wouldn't want you to drown." He glided away, leaving a wake of smug superiority. Elara ignored him. She spent the first 2 weeks observing, just as Julian had instructed. She was a ghost in high-level meetings, a silent presence in the corner, taking notes. She read years of reports, memorizing the cadence of each executive's writing style, the way they structured their arguments, their preferred data visualizations. She was learning their signatures, not just the ones they wrote with a pen, but the ones they imprinted on every aspect of their work. Genevieve Dubois, head of operations, was methodical, her reports dense with data but lacking in creative leaps. She was loyal, risk-averse, and openly wary of Elara. Kenji Tanaka, the tech prodigy, was all disruption and jargon, his presentations dazzling but sometimes thin on substance. He treated Elara with a polite, almost clinical curiosity. Marcus Thorne was different. His work was brilliant, aggressive, and flawless. Too flawless. His projections were always uncannily accurate. His risk assessments were perfectly hedged. It was like looking at a painting by a master forger. Technically perfect, but lacking the messy, unpredictable soul of a true original. Her first real test came during a review of a potential acquisition, a mid-sized German robotics firm called Automaton GmbH. Marcus was championing the deal, presenting it as a crucial step into the European market. The numbers were perfect. The synergy was obvious. Julian was on the verge of signing off. "Ms. Vance," Julian said, his voice cutting through the boardroom consensus. "Your thoughts?" Every head turned towards her. It was a deliberate public challenge. Marcus Thorne's smile tightened. "I'm sure Elara is still getting up to speed on the complexities of international robotics acquisitions," he said smoothly. "The numbers are compelling," Elara said, her voice quiet but clear. She opened her own file, not on a tablet, but a simple notebook filled with her own handwriting. "But I have a question about the R&D expenditure reports from the 3rd quarter of last year. Specifically the invoices from a supplier, a graphite composite manufacturer named Carbon Dynamics." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "A minor materials supplier. What about them?" "I couldn't find any corporate registration for a Carbon Dynamics in Germany or anywhere in the EU," Elara continued. "So I looked at the raw invoice scans attached in the appendix of your report. The font on the invoice, specifically the kerning on the capital C and D, is identical to the default font used by the accounting software your own department implemented last year. It's a small thing, but it's the wrong font for a document supposedly generated by an external company." The room was silent. She was accusing him in the most oblique way possible of fabricating supplier invoices to inflate the R&D value of the company they were about to buy. Marcus laughed, a sound a little too loud. "This is absurd. You're questioning $100 million deal based on a font? We're not in an art class, Ilara." "Forgeries are often discovered in the details," Ilara said, meeting his gaze. "The frame, the signature, the font." "This is a waste of time," Marcus snapped, turning to Julian. "Are we really going to let a waitress derail this deal over typography?" Julian Croft remained impassive, his fingers steepled. "Put a hold on the acquisition," he ordered. "I want a full, independent forensic audit of Automaton's financials. Start with their suppliers." He stood up. "Meeting adjourned." As the executives filed out, a mixture of shock and morbid excitement on their faces, Marcus Thorne stopped by Ilara's chair. His voice was a venomous whisper. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed. "You just made a very powerful enemy. This isn't a diner. You can't just smile and de-escalate your way out of this." He was right. She had exposed the first crack in his masterpiece of deception, and now the forger would do anything to protect his work. The subtle war of whispers and condescension was over. A direct campaign of sabotage had begun. The forensic audit of Automaton GmbH confirmed Ilara's suspicions. Carbon Dynamics was a shell company, and the invoices were indeed fabrications designed to pad the German firm's valuation. Marcus had been receiving kickbacks. The deal was killed, saving Croft Holdings a fortune and a massive scandal. Julian didn't congratulate Ilara. He simply forwarded her the final audit report without comment. It was the highest form of praise he could offer, but her victory painted a target on her back. Marcus Thorne, humiliated and now under a cloud of internal suspicion, came after her with a cold, calculated fury. It started small. A critical file she needed would be mysteriously corrupted. An urgent meeting would be scheduled, and she would be accidentally left off the invitation list. He began to build a narrative among the other executives that she was a loose cannon, an unqualified amateur whose lucky guess had cost them a valuable European foothold. Ilara, however, was used to a different kind of chaos. The corporate world, with its predictable aggressions, was far less complex than juggling 12 tables during a Sunday brunch rush. She started keeping redundant digital and physical copies of everything. She sent summary emails after every conversation, creating an unassailable paper trail. She was playing defense with a meticulousness that infuriated Marcus. He knew he couldn't beat her on competence. He had to destroy her credibility. He had to weaponize her past. He hired a discreet private investigator, a man who specialized in digging up the kind of dirt that could be used in hostile takeovers. The mandate was simple: find a vulnerability in Ilara Vance. Meanwhile, Ilara was focusing on her own investigation. Marcus was a forger, but she suspected the Automaton deal wasn't his masterpiece. It was just a sketch. The real sabotage, the Singapore deal, was a far more complex work. She went back to the original data, spending her nights poring over shipping manifests, encrypted communications, and network access logs from the time of the leak. She wasn't looking for a smoking gun. She was looking for a stylistic tell, the forger's signature. She found it in the code. The altered data in the Singapore leak had been manipulated with a piece of custom malware, a sophisticated virus that had bypassed all of Croft Holdings' formidable cyber defenses. The company's tech genius, Kenji Tanaka, had concluded it was the work of a state-sponsored actor. But Ilara, looking at the malware structure, saw something else. It was elegant, ruthlessly efficient, but it had a flourish, a small, unnecessary recursive loop in the redaction protocol. It was like a painter adding a tiny, hidden self-portrait in the corner of a canvas. It was a mark of ego, She cross-referenced that code structure with every internal project Kenji's department had ever developed. She found no match, but then she expanded her search, looking at projects Marcus Thorne had overseen. And there it was, a nearly identical piece of code, the same egotistical flourish, in a data-parsing algorithm he had commissioned for a South American mining acquisition 2 years prior. Marcus hadn't just leaked the data. He had used a custom-built digital weapon, one he had commissioned and then buried, to do it. Just as she was connecting these dots, the investigator Marcus hired called him with news. He hadn't found any dirt on Ilara herself. Her life was pathetically clean. But he had found a connection. "It's about the diner robbery," the investigator said. "The police arrested one of the perps a few weeks ago. Kid named Leo Garcia. Turns out his cousin used to date Ilara Vance's cousin. It's a weak link, but it's a link." A cold, brilliant idea began to form in Marcus's mind. A weak link was all he needed. He could paint a new picture, a new forgery, with Ilara at the center. He began his masterpiece. He created a fake encrypted email chain between a burner account and a known associate of Leo Garcia. He expertly mimicked the slang and syntax of low-level criminals. In the emails, he laid out a narrative. Ilara, desperate for money for her grandfather, had used her cousin's connection to tip off the robbers that a wealthy, reclusive billionaire was a regular at the diner. She had orchestrated the whole thing to play the hero and get Julian Croft's attention. To make it perfect, he used his hidden malware to plant these fabricated emails deep within the company's own servers, backdating them to before the robbery, making them look like intercepted communications that the security team had missed. It was his word against hers, but he would have digital proof. The final piece of his plan was the delivery. He couldn't just present this to Julian. It would look like sour grapes. He had to make it seem like Julian discovered it himself. Marcus anonymously tipped off a tech journalist he had on his payroll about a potential security breach at Croft Holdings, hinting that the company's own systems might hold the key to a recent, high-profile crime. He knew Julian's paranoia and pride would do the rest. The CEO would initiate a deep-level security sweep. The fabricated emails would be discovered, and Ilara Vance's career would be annihilated. The trap was set. The perfect forgery was complete, and Ilara, on the verge of exposing him, had no idea that she was about to be framed not just for corporate espionage, but for the very crime that had brought her to Julian Croft in the first place. The discovery of the fabricated emails sent a shock wave through the 90th floor. The internal security sweep, triggered by the journalist's inquiry, as Marcus had predicted, unearthed the damning communication chain. To Julian Croft, whose default setting was a deep-seated paranoia, the evidence was a confirmation of his worst fears. He had been played. The story was perfect. A desperate young woman, a damsel in distress who had orchestrated her own rescue. It was a narrative as old as time, and his own arrogance had made him the perfect mark. He didn't fire her immediately. That would be too simple. His rage was a cold, quiet thing, and he wanted to see the lie in her eyes. He summoned her, not to his office, but to his private vault. A sterile, climate-controlled room in the building's sub-basement, where he kept his most valuable and most vulnerable masterpieces. The air was cold and still. "I've been reviewing our network security protocols," Julian began, his voice devoid of all emotion. He gestured to a large monitor on the wall, which displayed the fabricated email chain. "My team found these. Communications between a known associate of one of the diner robbers and an unknown party, detailing a plan. A plan to stage a confrontation at the Gilded Spoon to attract my attention. Ilara read the words on the screen, her blood turning to ice. The dates, the feigned desperation, the mention of her grandfather. It was a meticulous, venomous fiction. She felt the floor drop out from beneath her. This is not real," she whispered. "This is a fabrication." "Is it?" Julian countered, his voice dangerously soft. "It's a compelling narrative, Ms. Vance. It explains everything so neatly. The coincidence of my presence, your impossible calm, your uncanny ability to land a job for which you have no qualifications. It's the most logical explanation." The mention of logic was the spark. Ilara's fear, sharp and overwhelming, was suddenly eclipsed by a cold, analytical anger. He wasn't seeing her. He was seeing a story someone else had painted. "No, Mr. Croft," she said, her voice gaining strength. "It's the easiest explanation. A forger relies on the viewer wanting to believe the story. You want to believe this because it confirms your worldview, that everyone is a traitor, that you can't trust anyone. You are the perfect audience for this lie." She walked closer to the screen. "Look at it. Really look at it. Not the story, the details." Her mind was racing, her training taking over. "The timestamps on these emails, they're all marked UTC, Coordinated Universal Time. But the metadata, the server origination stamp, is EST. The forger forgot to sync the display time with the actual server time. It's a rookie mistake. It's the wrong varnish on a 17th century painting." Julian stared at the screen, a flicker of doubt in his cold eyes. "And the language," Ilara pressed on, her confidence building. "The slang is all wrong. It's a caricature, like someone who has only ever seen criminals in movies. The whale is in the diner. The score of a lifetime. Real people don't talk like that. It's not authentic." She turned to face him, her gaze unflinching. "This isn't evidence. This is a work of art. And it has a signature. The malware used to plant these files on the server, to backdate them so they would be discovered. I'd be willing to bet it contains a very specific recursive loop in its redaction protocol." She pulled out her own tablet, her hand steady, and brought up the code she had found. The code from the Singapore sabotage and the identical code from Marcus's old mining project. She held it up. "This is the artist's signature, and the artist is Marcus Thorne." The silence in the vault was absolute, broken only by the hum of the climate control systems. Julian looked from the code on her tablet to the fabricated emails on the monitor, the pieces clicking into place with the force of a tectonic shift. He saw it then. The larger, more brilliant forgery. He hadn't just been the victim of a traitor. He had been a pawn in one's attempt to frame an innocent. "He's been playing you from the beginning," Ilara said, her voice softening slightly. "He sabotaged the Singapore deal. He tried to defraud you with the automaton acquisition. When I got too close, he didn't just try to discredit me. He used your own paranoia against you. He painted a masterpiece of deception, and you were ready to hang it on the wall." Julian Croft, a man who had not shown a moment of vulnerability in 30 years, slowly sank into the lone chair in the middle of the room. The cold certainty that had been his armor for decades had shattered. He had been wrong. Utterly, catastrophically wrong. "Get Thorne," he said, his voice a low growl directed at the intercom. "Tell him to meet me here. Now." When Marcus Thorne entered the vault, a confident smirk on his face, he saw Ilara and his expression faltered. He saw the code on her tablet and the look on Julian's face, and all the color drained from his own. He had been outmaneuvered. The waitress had seen the flaw in his final, perfect creation. The confrontation was short and brutal. There was no shouting, just Julian's quiet, lethal questions and Marcus's crumbling denials. Security was called. As they escorted a pale, trembling Marcus Thorne from the vault, his career and life in ruins, Julian turned to Ilara. "You were right," he said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. "My judgment was compromised. I saw what I expected to see." He looked around the vault, at the priceless art that surrounded them. "These are just things. Assets. Your clarity. That is the only priceless thing in this room." The fallout from Marcus Thorne's spectacular implosion was contained, a quiet corporate execution. But the event fundamentally changed Julian Croft. His paranoia, once a shield, was now revealed to be a vulnerability. He realized his empire, built on flawless systems and cold logic, had a fatal flaw. It lacked a conscience. A week later, he called Ilara into his office. "I am dissolving the office of the CEO," he announced, "and I am creating a new division, the Office of Corporate Integrity. It will have unprecedented power to audit any deal, vet any new hire, and override any executive decision if it detects a breach of ethics or legality. It will be my eyes. It will be the company's authenticator. And you will run it." It was a staggering promotion. Ilara Vance, the waitress from the Gilded Spoon, was now one of the most powerful people at Croft Holdings. Her first act was to hire a small, unconventional team, a retired forensic accountant with a penchant for puzzles, a behavioral psychologist who specialized in deception, and a young, hungry white-hat hacker. They were misfits, outsiders like her, who saw the world differently. The process was not easy. The old guard resented her, viewing her new department as an internal affairs witch hunt. But slowly, painstakingly, she rebuilt the foundations of trust within the company. Her team vetted deals with a new, human-centric lens. They didn't just look at the numbers, they looked at the character of the people involved. They spotted forgeries not just in invoices, but in mission statements and corporate culture. Her grandfather's surgery was a complete success. Ilara would often visit him in his workshop, now bright and perfectly lit, and watch as his steady hands brought time back to life. He was seeing clearly again, and so was she. The viral moment, the one that would capture the world's imagination, came nearly a year later. Ilara's Office of Integrity, during a routine audit of a potential merger, uncovered a massive international pension fraud scheme, a complex web of shell companies that would have wiped out the life savings of tens of thousands of retirees. Croft Holdings didn't just back out of the deal. They turned the evidence over to the authorities, triggering a global investigation. A tenacious journalist from the Wall Street Journal, intrigued by how this quiet logistics company had uncovered a scandal that had eluded regulators, started digging. She traced the origins of the mysterious Office of Corporate Integrity back to its enigmatic leader, Ilara Vance. The trail led her to New Orleans, to a quiet diner called the Gilded Spoon, to a story of a robbery, a calm waitress, and a reclusive billionaire who saw something no one else did. The article, headlined, "The Billionaire's Authenticator, How a Waitress's Eye for Forgery Saved a Global Empire," was an explosion. It became a viral sensation, a modern-day parable not about a lucky break, but about the extraordinary value of unconventional expertise. Ilara, in the few interviews she reluctantly gave, masterfully framed the narrative. "Mr. Croft didn't hire a waitress," she explained. "He hired a specialist whose skills were being underutilized. My training was in identifying the subtle tells of a forgery. Whether that forgery is a 17th century painting or a 21st century financial report, the principles are the same. You have to look past the surface and see the flaw in the story. Talent is everywhere. You just have to have the clarity to see it." From her office on the 90th floor, Ilara launched the foundation she had been planning for months, the MacLeod Vance Initiative, named for Julian's honest mentor and her meticulous grandfather. It didn't just give scholarships, it funded programs designed to identify and nurture unique, non-traditional analytical talents in underprivileged communities, creating a pipeline for the next generation of authenticators. One evening, Julian Croft stopped by her office, looking at the initiative's charter spread across her desk. "Alistair would have liked this," he said, a rare note of warmth in his voice. "He always said the most valuable assets don't appear on a balance sheet." "He was right," Ilara said, looking out at the city lights twinkling below, a vast canvas of human stories. "The flaws are what make things interesting. And the truth, well, the truth always has the most elegant composition." Julian looked at the woman he had hired, the woman who had saved him from his own fortress of suspicion. He had spent his life acquiring companies, but in Ilara Vance, he had acquired something infinitely more valuable: a moral compass. The waitress from the back booth hadn't just changed her own life. She had authenticated his.